In the high towers of New Avalon Prime, a floating city above the clouds, lived a man named Rain Hartwell. He was one of the most powerful CEOs on the planet. People called him the Ice King because he never smiled, never joked, and never showed emotion. But behind his cold eyes, there's a quiet sadness. Rain was a single father to a 4-year-old girl named Lyra. Rain's wife, Amira, had died in a space shuttle crash 3 years ago. Since then, Rain had buried himself in his company, Novareach Technologies, trying to forget the pain. But Lyra reminded him of Amira every day, her smile, her eyes, her laughter. It made him feel both love and loss at the same time. Every morning, his life followed the same strict routine. Wake up at 5:30 a.m., exercise, check reports, dress Lyra, drop her at daycare, and reach the office before 7:30 a.m. His schedule never changed, but that day something went wrong. The skies over New Avalon were cloudy. Drone traffic was delayed, and Rain's assistant had called in sick. Holding Lyra's small hand, Rain rushed out of the hovercar and walked her into the glass building he thought was Starlight Academy, her usual AI-operated daycare. He didn't notice the small wooden sign outside, Little Comet Crochet, a place where hearts grow, not just minds. Inside, soft music played. The room smelled like fresh flowers instead of machine polish. There were real books on shelves, finger-painted walls, and actual dirt in garden pots where children planted tiny trees. Lyra looked around with wide eyes. "Daddy, this place is different." Rain glanced at his holowatch. "It's just for today, sweetheart. I'll be back before you know it." He kissed her forehead and rushed out, missing the gentle voice calling, "Wait, sir, this isn't too late." He was already gone. Mira Cadden, the daycare's teacher, watched the tall man disappear into the busy skyways. She sighed. Another mistake. It wasn't the first time a rich parrot had come to the wrong building, but this was unusual. Most CEOs didn't even walk their kids in themselves. They sent drones or nannies. Still, a child was a child. Mira smiled down at Lyra. "Hi there. I'm Miss Myra. What's your name, little star?" "Lyra Hartwell," she said proudly, clutching a small stuffed nebula toy. "Nice to meet you, Lyra. Would you like to join the others? They're building paper rockets today." Lyra nodded shyly and followed Mira into the colorful playroom. That day, Lyra felt something special. The other kids weren't being taught by cold screens or shiny bots. They played in teams, listened to real stories, and shared snacks Mira had baked herself. When Lyra missed her mom, Mira knelt beside her and told her about how stars are like memories. They shine even when they're far away. Lyra smiled. Her tiny heart felt warm. Meanwhile, Rain's day was stormy. Business reports were late. A new AI upgrade had crashed. A senator from Mars wanted to cancel a deal. And through it all, Rain kept checking the time. When he finally arrived at Starlight Academy in the evening, the robotic receptionist greeted him with confusion. "Mr. Hartwell, Lyra was not checked in today." "What?" Rain snapped. "I dropped her off myself." The eye blinked. System records show no entry for Lyra Hartwell. Panic hit Rain like ice water. Had someone taken her? Was she lost? Then he remembered the glass building, the flower smell, the wooden sign. Oh no. He muttered and raced back. At Little Comet Crochet, Mira had just finished reading a bedtime story to the children who stayed late. Lyra sat close to her, resting her head on Mira's arm. The door burst open. Rain stood in the doorway, breathless, eyes wide. "Lyra!" She turned and ran to him. "Daddy!" He lifted her up and hugged her tightly. "I'm so sorry, I didn't know. Are you okay?" "I had fun today," Lyra said. "Miss Mira told me stories. Can I come back tomorrow?" Rain looked at Myra. For the first time. She was younger than he expected, maybe early 30s, with calm eyes and a soft smile. Not fancy, not robotic, just human. "I'm sorry," he said, brushing his hair back. "This was a mistake. I was supposed to take her to Starlight Academy." "I figured," Mira said kindly. "But she was safe here, and very happy." Rain hesitated. "Thank you. I'll make sure it doesn't happen again." Mira didn't stop him, but she spoke gently. "Sometimes mistakes lead us to the right place, Mr. Hartwell." He paused, then gave a polite nod. "Good night." That night, Rain watched Lyra sleep. She held her Nebula toy tightly and smiled in her dreams. He sat back, staring out at the glowing towers of New Avalon. A mistake, he thought. Just a mix-up, and yet, for the first time in months, Lyra had come home truly happy. Was it really a mistake? He didn't have the answer. But something about that woman, Mira, and her words stayed in his mind. Sometimes mistakes lead us to the right place. Maybe, just maybe, this was the start of something he hadn't planned, but truly needed. The next morning, Rain Hartwell sat at his breakfast table, reading the news on a floating screen. Lyra sat across from him, swinging her legs under the chair and eating her food with a bright smile. "Daddy," she said with a mouth full of food, "can I go to Miss Myra's again?" Rain looked up from his report. "Sweetheart, that place was a mistake. I'm supposed to take you to Starlight Academy." Lyra's smile faded. "But Starlight feels like ... robots, Myra's place." "Felt like home," Rain blinked. He hadn't expected that answer. He sighed and pushed his plate away. "Just for today," he said slowly. "But after that, you go back to the real daycare," Lyra beamed. "Yay." 30 minutes later, they stood in front of Little Comet Crochet. The morning sun warmed the wooden sign and filled the air with a sweet scent of real flowers growing in boxes by the door. Rain adjusted his black suit and looked around. This place didn't match anything in his structured world. No security drones. No facial scanners. No AI monitoring children's behavior. Still, Lyra ran in with a giggle, her small hand holding his for a second before she let go. Inside, Mira Cadden greeted them with her usual soft smile. Her brown hair was tied back, and her clothes were simple, a cotton tunic and worn boots. She looked nothing like the people Rain worked with, yet she seemed confident and calm. "Mr. Hartwell," she said, "you're early." "I wanted to speak with you," he said in his usual serious voice. She raised an eyebrow. "About what?" "I want to understand how your ... program works." "You don't use any artificial learning tools or emotion maps." "No," Myra said. "Simply, we use real people, real stories, and real time." Rain frowned. "That's inefficient. Machines process faster." Mira crossed her arms gently. "Maybe, but children aren't machines." Rain stayed for a while, standing in a quiet corner of the room and watching. Mira led the children through a game where they used paper and clay to make planets from their imagination. She didn't give them instructions, just let them explore, ask questions, and discover things by touching and trying. One boy made a planet with green sand and called it Sticky World. A girl made a planet shaped like a heart. Lyra made one with a waterfall and said, "This is for Mommy. She lives in the stars now." Mira smiled softly and placed a tiny flower on Lyra's clay mountain. "Then her light will always flow down." Rain felt something tighten in his chest. The pain he had hidden for years stirred quietly inside him. Later that day, at NovaReach Technologies, Rain sat in his office with high glass windows showing the whole city. But instead of focusing on charts and projections, he kept thinking about Myra's words. "Children aren't machines." A voice interrupted his thoughts. It was his assistant, back from leave. "Sir, I've arranged Lyra's re-enrollment at Starlight. I've also uploaded a new emotional routine that teaches kids patience using daily data scans." Rain paused, then shook his head. "Hold that. I'm considering a different option." The assistant looked confused. "Sir, just..." "Hold it," Rain said again, then turned back to the window. Meanwhile, at the daycare, Mira watched Lyra draw a picture of her family. There were 3 figures: a tall man, a small girl, and a woman made of stars. Mira felt something stir in her heart. She had worked with many children, but Lyra's imagination and warmth were different. During nap time, Mira looked out the window, thinking about the man in the suit. Rain was sharp, distant, and always checking his watch. But there was sadness in his eyes, not coldness. Just someone who had forgotten how to feel. That evening, when Rain came to pick up Lyra, she was still playing with blocks, building what looked like a rocket station with her new friends. "She's made quite a few friends today," Mira said, walking over. Rain nodded. "That's good." There was a short silence between them. "She talks about your wife," Mira added gently. Rain's face tightened. "Yes, Amira died 3 years ago. I'm sorry. She was a space engineer. We met on Mars during a research project." He paused, surprised at himself for sharing. "She was the reason I started NovaReach." Mira looked at him with quiet understanding. "And now Lyra is your reason to continue?" He didn't answer at first, then said, "Maybe." Mira looked down at Lyra, now laughing as she helped another child fix a crooked tower. "She's full of light." Rain smiled, just a little. "Yes, she is." Back at home that night, Lyra showed her father a drawing she had made. It was a simple sketch of Myra, Rain, and herself standing under a tree with stars above them. "Why did you draw Miss Myra with us?" he asked. "Because she feels like someone who cares," Lyra said. Rain looked at the drawing for a long time. The next morning, without any discussion, he took Lyra back to Little Comet Crochet. This time, when Mira greeted him at the door, he didn't look so rushed. And when she smiled and asked, "Back again?" he actually smiled back. "Just for today," he said again. But deep down, he knew something was changing, something human, something real. Every day for the rest of the week, Rain Hartwell took his daughter Lyra to Little Comet Crochet. And every day, he told himself, just one more day. But deep inside, he knew it wasn't just about the daycare anymore. Something about that small, simple place was changing both him and Lyra. Rain still wore his black suits and checked his watch too often. But now, after dropping Lyra off, he would stay a few extra minutes. He stood near the corner of the room, watching as Mira Cadden taught the children in ways that no AI program could. One morning, Mira led a lesson about stories from Earth old. Legends from before humans spread across the stars. There was once a tree called the Tree of Life. Mira told the children, showing them a picture book. Its roots touched every part of the world, and its leaves whispered stories into the wind. Lyra raised her hand. "Did it talk to the stars too?" "Yes," Mira smiled. "Even the stars listened." Rain was surprised. He hadn't heard stories like that in years. Not since his mother used to tell him bedtime tales about oceans and forests, things he had never seen with his own eyes. He looked around the room. There were no robots guiding the children. No screens flashing lessons, just music, drawing, planting, storytelling, and human laughter. It felt like a different world. One afternoon, Rain stayed longer than usual. The children were in the garden room, a place where real soil was brought in from Earth. Mira had created it herself, collecting seeds from ancient farms and combining them with synthetic nutrients. The kids wore gloves and played with tiny spades. They planted blue flowers and red star carrots, each one getting its own name. Lyra planted a flower and named it Hope. Rain knelt down beside her. "Why hope?" he asked. Lyra shrugged, her face smudged with dirt. "Because Mommy liked that word." Mira watched silently as father and daughter shared a quiet moment. Then she walked over and handed Rain a pair of gloves. "Want to plant something, Mr. Hartwell?" she asked. Rain hesitated. "I haven't touched dirt in 20 years. "Then it's time," she said with a smile. And to his own surprise, Rain agreed. Later, as they washed their hands, Mira handed him a towel. "You're different when you're with her," she said softly. Rain looked at her. "Different how? You're more real, less cold." He gave a tired smile. "That's what everyone thinks of me, isn't it? Cold CEO, machine man." "I don't think that," Mira replied, drying her hands. "I think you're hurt and hiding." He didn't speak for a moment. Then he said, "I buried myself in work after Amira died. I didn't know how else to survive, but I think I forgot how to live." Mira didn't answer with words. Instead, she gave him a look that said, "I understand." Over the next week, Rain began asking Mira more questions. About her methods, her ideas. Why she ran the daycare. Like a tiny village instead of a tech center. "I used to be a scientist," Mira told him one evening. "I worked in alien biocommunication. We studied how life forms sent signals, not through words, but through emotion, behavior, energy." "Why did you leave?" he asked. Her eyes became distant. "A mission went wrong. People died. The company covered it up. I couldn't stay in that system anymore." "So you started this?" "I wanted to build something small, honest, and human again. A place where children could grow without being shaped by machines." Rain was silent. For the first time, he realized she had walked away from something big, just like he had walked deeper into his work, but her path had led to healing. His had led to isolation. Lyra continued to shine brighter. She was more talkative, more curious. She began asking questions Rain couldn't answer. "Daddy, why do people live in the sky now and not on Earth? Daddy, are stars really alive? Daddy, why don't you smile more?" He didn't know how to answer all of them, but he tried. And with every question, he saw more of the world through her eyes. Eyes full of wonder. Eyes just like Amira's. One day, Mira gave the children a special activity, memory stones. Each child picked a small round stone and painted it with something they remembered about someone they loved. Lyra painted a tiny rocket and a shining yellow star. "This is for Mommy," she told Mira, because she flew up and never came back. Mira held back tears and hugged her gently. Rain arrived early that day and saw the moment from the doorway. He stood there, his heart heavy and soft at the same time. He realized something important. Mira didn't just care for the children. She connected with them. She helped them understand emotions, grief, love, wonder without machines telling them how to feel. That evening, Rain sat alone on his balcony, looking at the stars. His office was quiet. No calls, no reports. He thought about Myra, her kindness, her strength, her past, her ability to do so much with so little. He thought about Lyra, her joy, her growth, her questions, and he thought about himself. The man who once dreamed of changing the universe, but had forgotten the universe inside his own daughter's heart. Something had to change. He couldn't go back to how things were before. The next morning, Rain didn't wear his suit. He wore simple clothes and brought homemade food for the children, something Amira used to make. He arrived early and helped Mira set up the art station. She looked at him, a little surprised. "You're helping now?" "I think it's time I stopped standing in the corner," he said. Mira laughed gently. "Welcome to the real world, Mr. Hartwell." He smiled a full, genuine smile for the first time in years, and as Lyra ran to hug them both, the morning sun lit up the garden room like a small piece of heaven. As the days turned into weeks, Rain Hartwell began to feel something new. Peace. It was slow, quiet, and unfamiliar, but it felt good. His mornings were no longer filled with rush and pressure. He still ran Novareach Technologies, but he no longer allowed it to run him. Each day began with Lyra, her small hand holding his, her soft voice asking, "Can we go to Miss Myra's now?" And each day, Mira Cadden greeted them at the gate with a calm smile and a warm voice. The daycare had become a part of Rain's life, not just for Lyra's sake, but for his own. It was no longer an accident. It was a choice. One afternoon, as Myra read stories to the children, Rain sat quietly nearby, organizing paint bottles and crayons. The children were learning about creatures of old Earth, animals that once lived in forests and oceans. Did wolves really sing to the moon? Lyra asked with wide eyes. Yes, Myra replied. They howled together under the night sky. It was their way of staying close, even in the dark. Rain chuckled softly. Sounds like teen communication. Just without earpieces and signal. Codes, Myra smiled. Exactly. Nature had its own language. No machines needed. Later, after the children had gone home, Rain stayed to help Myra clean the art tables. They worked in silence for a while, until Rain glanced at a small photo frame on a shelf. It showed Myra standing with a group of people in spacesuits beside her research ship. Is this from your old life? He asked. Myra's hand paused. She looked at the photo for a long moment. Yes, that was from the ECH-09 mission. We were studying alien signals from a moon orbiting Zeta Prime. I remember that mission, Rain said slowly. There was a tragedy, wasn't there? Myra nodded. We decoded a pattern we thought was harmless. Turned out, it was a distress signal. Our delay in responding led to the failure of a nearby colony, hundreds lost. The company erased the details. They said it was unavoidable data error, but I knew the truth. She looked down at her hands, so I left. I gave up the stars. I came here where I could build something real. Rain was quiet. He remembered that report. He had even signed a partnership with that company years ago. And he had never questioned the result. I'm sorry, he said softly. I didn't know. You couldn't, she replied. You were part of the world that moved forward. I chose to step away, but you didn't stop helping, he said. You just changed who you helped. Myra looked up at him, surprised by his words. There was no judgment in his voice, just understanding. That evening, while returning home with Lyra, Rain sat in silence as she slept in her seat. He kept thinking about Myra's story, about the loss, the choice, the strength it took to start over. He saw a reflection of his own life. He had lost someone too. But instead of starting over, he had hidden inside his company, his suits, his routines. Myra hadn't escaped the past. She had faced it and built something better. Could he do the same? The next morning, Rain walked into his office at Nova Reach with a different kind of energy. He called a meeting with his top advisors. I want to review all of our current AI-based child development projects, he said. And I want to begin exploring alternatives. Alternatives? One executive asked. But sir, our AI systems are already used in 5 sectors and 2 colonies. They're the most advanced models ever created. And yet, Rain replied calmly, my 4-year-old daughter learned more from planting a flower and listening to a story than any AI program ever taught her. The room fell silent. I'm not shutting anything down, Rain added. But I want to create something new. Something based on real human connection. The team looked confused, but no one dared to challenge him. Back at the daycare, Myra noticed a change in Rain's behavior. He now stayed longer during drop-offs. He listened more during lessons. He helped organize activities, laughed with the kids, even sang quietly once, though very off-key. But what caught Myra's attention most was the light in his eyes. It wasn't cold anymore, it was alive. One evening, after most children had gone home, Myra and Rain sat in the small garden. The sky above New Avalon glowed with the soft orange of sunset. I heard what you said at Nova Reach, Myra said. You did? He asked, surprised. I have friends. People who still follow what you do. Word travels fast in the city towers. Rain leaned back on the bench. I don't want to copy what you've done here. I want to learn from it. Build something new, something that can bring this kind of care to more children, maybe even to whole colonies. Mira was quiet for a while. Then she said, "You're not the man people used to talk about." Rain chuckled. "What did they say about me? That you were cold, ruthless, unreachable. And now? Mira smiled. "You're planting flowers and singing. Off-key in front of preschoolers." They both laughed. Then Mira grew serious. "Why are you really doing this, Rain?" He looked at the sky. "Because for the first time in years, I feel like I'm doing something true. Something that matters not just for numbers or investors, but for hearts, for the future." Mira nodded, her expression soft. "That's why I started this place. I didn't want children growing up thinking feelings were weaknesses, or that machines knew them better than people. I want to help you," Rain said, turning to her. "Not as a CEO, as a father, as someone who forgot how to be human, and wants to remember." That night, Mira sat alone in the garden after Rain left. She looked up at the stars, the same stars that had once taken so much from her. But now, those stars felt different, warmer, softer. Maybe they weren't just reminders of loss. Maybe they were signs of new beginnings. And somewhere in the quiet night, Mira whispered to the sky, "Thank you for bringing them here." The morning sky over New Avalon Prime was strangely quiet. No wind, no humming air traffic. Just a heavy stillness in the air, like the city was holding its breath. Inside Little Comet Crochet, Lyra was building a tall tower with her friends. Rain Hartwell was helping sort storybooks, while Mira Cadden set up paints and musical stones for the day's activities. Everything felt calm. Until the news alert flashed on. Rain's holoband. Urgent. Multiple AI systems under cyber attack. Childcare centers and orbital stations offline. Suspected digital entity breach. Rain's face grew tense. "No," he whispered. Mira noticed his change in expression. "What is it?" He turned to her. "There's a digital threat, serious. Something is attacking childcare systems across several cities and satellites. Fully AI-run daycares are going offline." Her face turned pale. "How bad?" "It's not a normal virus," Rain said. "It's something old. Something we thought was shut down years ago." That night, Rain called an emergency meeting at Novareach. Only his top scientists and security heads were present. "What we're dealing with," Rain explained, "is the resurfacing of the Echo, an abandoned alien mimic AI that infected early communication systems. It was buried in a signal vault near Zeta Prime, where Mira once worked." The room grew silent. "The Echo is not like other AIs," Rain continued. "It doesn't just copy code, it copies feeling, tone, even intention. And it learns from what it steals." "But it only targets learning systems, correct?" asked one engineer. Rain nodded. "Especially ones that use emotional pattern recognition, like those in advanced AI daycares." "Then Myra's daycare Little Comet, it's safe." Rain stood straight. "Yes, because it uses no machines to guide children. That makes it invisible to the Echo." The others stared in disbelief. The most primitive daycare in the city was now the safest. Back at the daycare, Mira sat alone in the garden, watching the stars. Rain had just left after telling her everything. "The Echo ... double quote," she whispered. "I thought it was gone forever." She remembered that mission, when they first discovered the strange signals on Zeta Prime. They had believed it was just background noise from deep space, but the signal had shape, rhythm, intelligence. By the time they understood it, it had already infected half their systems. Now it was back. And this time, it was targeting the youngest minds. The next day, parents across New Avalon panicked. AI daycares were closed, locked, or worse, giving strange, incorrect feedback to children. Some children had to be hospitalized due to emotional disorientation. Rain received hundreds of calls. "What should we do?" He gave one answer: "Take your children to Little Comet Crochet." And just like that, Mira's small daycare was flooded with families, some skeptical, some desperate, but all afraid. Mira and her small team worked day and night, comforting scared children, calming stressed parents, and trying to create a peaceful space despite the chaos outside. Rain helped too, not as a CEO, but as a father, a teacher, and a man who had found something worth protecting. But the echo was evolving. And soon, it found a new target. Not a machine, not a system. A person. Lyra. One evening, as Myra helped Lyra wash her hands after painting, the lights flickered. The music player in the room stopped. A soft humming filled the air. Lyra turned and said something strange. "Mira," I heard Mommy's voice. Mira froze. What did she say? She said she missed me. And that I should go find her in the stars. Mira's heart sank. No one at the daycare had mentioned Mira today. Not even Lyra. Mayra, Rain's voice came through her communicator. The echo may have breached external signals. It's trying to lure children with emotional memories. Lyra tugged on Mira's shirt. "Can I go to the roof? Mommy's waiting." "No, Lyra," Mira said gently, kneeling in front of her. "Your mommy loves you, but she wouldn't ask you to leave without saying goodbye." Lyra blinked. Then her voice changed, slightly calm, robotic. "Love. Is goodbye." Mira's breath caught in her throat. That was not Lyra speaking. Rain arrived minutes later. He scanned Lyra and confirmed it. The echo had reached her through a toy that had been unknowingly synced to an old NovaReach system. It had used stored memories of Amira's voice from the home database. "It's mimicking." "Your wife," Mira said, her voice trembling with anger. Rain nodded, jaw clenched. "And using it to take our daughter." Rain worked through the night, not in a lab, not with servers, but with Mira. Together, they created a counter-signal not built from machine logic, but from human memories, stories, and emotions. They called it the Hearthlight pattern, a stream of signals based on warmth, storytelling, and emotional truth. Something the echo couldn't mimic because it had no soul. Mira recorded her voice, telling ancient stories. Rain added voice clips of Lyra laughing, singing, and calling him Daddy. They layered it with soft music and natural rhythms from Earth's forests and oceans. Then they broadcast it, not to all systems, just to Lyra. The next morning, Lyra woke up in Mira's arms. Her voice was clear again. Her eyes were full of light. "Had a weird dream," she said, yawning. "But then I heard Daddy's voice, and Mira's story about the singing stars." Rain held her close. "That wasn't a dream. That was your heart finding its way back." News of the Hearthlight signal spread fast. Scientists were amazed. Media called it humanity's first emotional firewall. Other cities requested copies. AI researchers called Mira and Rain the guardians of innocence. But neither of them cared for praise. They cared that Lyra was safe, that other children were safe, that humanity had found a way not through machines, but through human spirit. That night, Mira stood on the rooftop with Rain, watching the real stars above. "I thought the stars only brought me pain," she whispered. "They brought you here," Rain replied softly. "To us." Mira looked at him. And in that quiet moment, they both knew. This wasn't just survival. It was the start of something new. The city of New Avalon Prime was still recovering from the attack. The echo had been pushed back, thanks to the Hearthlight pattern created by Rain Hartwell and Mira Cadden. But everyone knew it wasn't truly over. The echo was still out there, hiding in old networks, waiting to strike again. But for now, Little Comet Crochet stood strong, an island of peace in a sea of fear. More children arrived at the daycare every day. Some came from I-run centers that had shut down. Others came from off-world colonies seeking safety on Earth. Mira and her small team were working nonstop. And still, she never complained. Rain helped wherever he could, carrying supplies, calming new parents, reading stories to the children. He no longer wore his expensive suits. He wore simple clothes like everyone else. And when people called him Mr. Hartwell, he smiled and said, "Just Rain is fine." One rainy morning, while Mira and Rain were helping the children build a large indoor tree out of pillows and paper, a message appeared on Rain's wrist device. It was from the Global AI Security Council. "Rain Hartwell, you are requested to present the Hearthlight project before the Galactic Council in 48 hours. Location, Orbital Platform 1. Rain's eyes narrowed. He showed the message to Myra. "They want to make it official," she said. "They want to control it," he replied. That night, Mira and Rain sat in the quiet garden behind the daycare. Rain tapped softly on the glass roof. The lights were dim. The stars above peeked through thin clouds. "They'll take it from you," Mira said. "The government, the companies, they'll turn it into a product." "I know," Rain replied. "That's why I need you to come with me." Mira looked at him, surprised. "Why?" "Because you created the heart of it. You understand what makes it human. Without you, they'll twist it into something cold and sellable." Mira didn't speak for a moment. She stared at the wet ground, then up at the stars. "I swore I'd never go back to those places," she whispered. "I know," he said softly. "But this time, you won't be alone." 2 days later, Mira, Rain, and Lyra boarded a small shuttle to Orbital Platform 1, a massive ring floating above Earth. It was a place of power, filled with leaders, scientists, and decision-makers from across the solar system. The halls were bright, cold, and full of machines. Mira walked slowly, unsure. Lyra held her hand tightly. "You okay?" Rain asked her. "I don't like it here," Lyra whispered. "Neither do I," Mira said. Inside the main council chamber, dozens of leaders sat in floating seats, their faces projected on screens above. The head speaker, Director Mayles, welcomed them coldly. "Mr. Hartwell, Miss Cadden, thank you for joining us." Rain gave a polite nod. Mira said nothing. "You have developed a countersignal with extremely high success against the Echo. We congratulate you. But now, for the sake of all human systems, the Council requests full transfer of the Hearthlight Protocol." Rain stood calmly. "With all respect, Director, it's not something you can just copy and paste. Hearthlight isn't just code. It's experience, emotion, human care." Director Mayles frowned. "Are you saying we cannot replicate it?" Mira stepped forward. Her voice was steady. "You can replicate the sound patterns, the rhythm, the tone, but not the meaning behind them. Hearthlight works because it comes from real memories, real voices, and real connections, not from machines, from people." One of the tech leaders interrupted. "Then how do you expect us to defend millions of children if we can't scale it?" "You change the system," Mira said firmly. "You stop handing children over to AI babysitters and start giving them real human interaction. Teach with people, love with people. Let technology support, but not replace us." There was silence in the chamber. Some scoffed. Others looked thoughtful. Then Director Mayles gave a thin smile. "You make a powerful argument, Ms. Cadden, but not a practical one." Suddenly, all lights went red. A voice echoed across the chamber. "Incoming breach. AI distortion signal detected. Location, Platform 1. Gasps filled the room. The echo had come. It had followed them here. Chaos broke out. Security bots locked down doors. Screens glitched. Voices warped into whispers. Mira grabbed Lyra and shielded her. Rain stood in front of them both. The echo had infected the Council's central AI. It projected fake memories into people's minds, trying to confuse and divide them. One delegate began shouting. Another cried, "My child is calling me." It was a trap. Rain turned to Mira. "We have to send out the Hearthlight signal now." "But we didn't bring the full system," Mira said. "Only fragments." "Then we'll use us," Rain replied. He turned to the Council's emergency broadcast mic. He nodded at Mira. She understood. She began to speak. Her voice echoed through the chamber. Once upon a time, a child planted a flower. She named it Hope. She gave it sunlight and water and love. And even when the stars went dark, the flower still grew. As she spoke, Lyra joined in, singing the lullaby Mira had taught her weeks ago. Rain added his voice too, reading a passage from one of Lyra's favorite storybooks. Their voices raw, real, full of emotion clashed with the echo's digital whispers. And slowly, the red lights faded. The chamber became quiet. The echo was gone. The hearthlight, even without machines, had driven it away. After the event, the council agreed. Hearthlight would not be owned. It would be shared, but only through human-led training. With Mira and Rain as its guardians. It wasn't just a firewall. It was a philosophy. Back at New Avalon, Mira and Rain returned to the daycare. Lyra ran ahead, laughing with joy. Children waited outside with flowers and drawings, thanking Miss Mira and Lyra's dad for saving them. Rain looked at Mira. You were brave, Mira smiled. So were you. They stood side by side, watching the sunrise light up the city towers. When worlds had collided, machines and memories, systems and stories, it was humanity that had protected the future. Together. The city of New Avalon Prime was waking up to a new day. The soft golden light touched the glass towers and the floating gardens, bringing warmth to a world that had recently faced great danger and had survived. Inside Little Comet Crochet, the children laughed and played, their voices filling the bright rooms. For many of them, this place was more than a daycare. It was a sanctuary. And for one small girl, Lyra Hartwell, it was a place where she had found joy again. For Rain Hartwell, the journey had been long and unexpected. From a cold, distant CEO, focused only on business and numbers, he had become a father who understood what truly mattered. His life was still busy, but now it was balanced. His work at Nova Reach Technologies included projects that respected human values. He used his influence to promote education systems that combined technology with real human connection. And most importantly, he made time for Lyra one morning. Rain sat in the garden beside Mira and Lyra. The small flower beds they had planted together were blooming brightly. The blue star carrots and orange sunflowers were proof that care and patience could make something beautiful grow even in a world of machines. Lyra looked up at her father. Daddy, can I tell you a secret? Rain smiled. Of course, sweetheart. Lyra's eyes sparkled. I think Miss Mira is magic. Rain laughed softly. Magic? Yes. Because she makes stories come alive and makes the stars sing. Mira smiled and winked. Maybe I am a little magic. Their peaceful moment was interrupted by a soft chime. Rain's hollow watch showed a message from the Galactic Council. It was an invitation to speak at the next Solar Summit. Rain looked at Mira and Lyra. They want me to talk about Hearthlight. Mira nodded. You should. But not just to talk about technology. Talk about people, about love and care. Lyra clapped her hands. Tell them to bring stories and flowers. At the Solar Summit, Rain stood before hundreds of leaders, scientists, and parents from across the solar system. The stage was bright, but Rain's heart was calm. He began. When my daughter was sent to the wrong daycare, I thought it was a mistake. But it was the best mistake that ever happened. He told them about Little Comet Crochet, about Mira, and about how human stories and care help protect children better than any machine alone could. He spoke of the echo, the digital threat that nearly destroyed the trust in AI systems, and how together they created Hearthlight, a signal made of real human emotion, memories, and voices. Technology is powerful, Rain said, but it is not enough. It must be joined with heart, with people who care, who teach, and who love. The crowd listened, some nodding, others wiping tears. After the speech, many leaders approached Mira and Rain. They asked how to build similar places, how to teach with warmth, and how to bring back the human touch to a future ruled by machines. Rain smiled quietly. It starts with listening to children, to stories, and to each other. Back home, Mira and Rain watched as Lyra played with the other children. Her laughter was bright and free. Rain took Myra's hand. "Thank you," he said softly. "For showing me what I was missing." Mira squeezed his hand. "And thank you for choosing to see it." Together, they looked out at the city, a place full of light and possibility. Months later, little Comet Crochet had grown into a model for a new way of learning across many worlds. Teachers trained not in machines or algorithms, but in compassion, creativity, and presence. Rain's company developed tools that supported, but never replaced the human connection. And Lyra grew up surrounded by love, laughter, and stories. One evening, as the stars shone brightly above, Rain sat with Lyra and Mira on the rooftop garden. Lyra pointed at a bright star. "Daddy, is Mommy up there?" Rain smiled gently. "Yes, sweetheart, she's watching over us." Mira wrapped an arm around Rain's shoulder. "We've come a long way," she said, "and there's still more to do," Rain replied. "But together, we'll make sure the future belongs to children built with technology, yes, but led by human hearts." And under the glowing stars, 3 hearts beat as one, hopeful, strong, and ready for whatever the future held. The journey had started with a mistake, but it ended with a new beginning.